well documented at this point how the success of Mario and Sonic shaped video game marketing in the 90s. If imitation really is flattery, Sega and Nintendo must have been blushing new shades of red as just about every company with an interest in software slapped together a starry-eyed mascot to lead in his own 2D platforming adventure. A lot of these mascots struggled to maintain relevance, as they simply didn't have the presence or appeal Nintendo and Sega had already firmly planted in the industry. Even big winners like Crash Bandicoot or Spyro the Dragon eventually lost the support of their parent companies as it became clear the mascot fad was over and platformers were no longer on vogue. But while Sega has always used the blue blur as their general use ambassador, he wasn't their only option. Sega games used to be dense with cartoony leading characters like Alex Kidd, Toe Jam, and Earl, whatever this guy from Knights is. Their name is Knights also, I guess. Knights from Knights. But today we're in the eye of the storm, a hurricane of retro platformer revivals. Crash is back, Pac-Man World is back, Bubsy's fucking back. Newcomers like A Hat in Time and Yooka-Laylee have reared their heads. KO the Kangaroo is back, and I don't even know who that is. But look, if anyone deserves a revival, I think it's one of Sega's very own. I'm talking about one of the very best platformers, hell, games in general, on the Genesis. I'm talking about Ristar. This game rules, man. Let's talk about it. In Ristar, you rise as Ristar, the rising star, against Greedy, that's his Christian name, as he plots to pull the entire galaxy under the sway of his mind control. Only a celestial body with sneakers is qualified for such a job, and that's you, as you traverse the galaxy in search of the villain, freeing a cavalcade of monsters from Greedy's influence. The story in Ristar it's cute, I don't know. It's exactly what it needs to be, and while presented rather well, doesn't waste any time getting to the good stuff. Let's do the same and talk gameplay. If Sonic was Sega's Mario, then Ristar feels like Sega's Kirby. This game is more forgiving than Sonic's Genesis entries, all of which had been released at this point. While Ristar borrows a lot from Big Blue in terms of UI and aesthetic direction, the game's fundamentals feel opposite. Ristar is a slow, simpler game where you are given swathes of time to explore and appreciate levels at your leisure. It's like sipping a fine wine, if Sonic the Hedgehog is more like shotgunning a White Claw. There's no timer in Ristar, hazards rarely feel brutal or exceedingly tricky, and the platforming is actually pretty minimal. The focus here is not on score chasing, collectible gobbling, or even jumping, really. It's about the core mechanic, Ristar's grab. Every level gimmick, enemy, hazard, and secret is interfaced with via this one-button move. That's why I say it's like Kirby. The original Kirby's Dream Land eases you into the platforming space with its simplicity. Everything revolves around Kirby's unique attack, his slurp, which allows inexperienced players to deal with hazards from afar rather than attempt a jump that, if timed poorly, could harm them. Ristar is much the same. You don't jump on enemies, you onto them and obliterate them. But what works in Ristar's favor is that the developers went truly wild with what this grab was used for. It's not just how you defeat enemies, it's how you climb ladders, pick up items, swing from branches and poles, flip switches, and so on. Everything in the game toys with the function of this one ability. This intuitively teaches the player that if they don't know what to do with a given scenario, they ought to try grabbing. And it always works, frequently in new and interesting ways. You might spam climb onto a wall to scale it, or launch yourself from a node to fly and reach secret areas. This suits the game's wide open levels perfectly, and encourages experimentation from the player in a genre where flashy set pieces are sometimes leaned on pretty heavily. And speaking of levels, let's talk about them. Ristar has 7 worlds, each with 2 reasonably long levels and an end boss. This game takes the premise of worlds pretty literally, as each new batch of levels has Ristar literally travel to a new planet. And the transition between levels feels so grandiose and exciting. You don't just exit stage left, you freaking off the stage, nabbing extra points and swerving into space. Structurally, there are some comparisons to be drawn to early Sonic levels. The levels are laid out with a lot of wiggle room to move around, with pits not usually leading to a game over, but instead a new area. It's less about clearing the course as quickly as possible, and more about scouring the place for secrets and solving little brain teasers to progress. It's not quite a puzzle game or an adventure game, but level gimmicks are more about using your grab intelligently than, say, avoiding a bunch of speedy hazards. You might need to maneuver around lava, or turn off dangerous machines, clear an area of enemies before you're able to progress, or conquer a small minigame like grabbing things in a prescribed order. What I like about this is that it means you're never doing the same thing for all too long. In my favorite world, Sonata, everything revolves around these little metronomes you pick up. To progress, you need to bring the metronomes to these funky chickens who sing a little ditty for your trouble. You can hold and carry the gnomes, but you can't grab anything while they're on hand. With the amount of ledges and floor spikes on this level, that means you'll be throwing them, activating switches with them, and leaving them behind. But you have to get them to wherever you're going. All of a sudden, you're thinking pretty creatively with the range of your grab, the different angles available to you, all to use these metronomes and then retrieve them. It's just classic good game design, and the whole game is like this. It ramps up in difficulty and breadth pretty consistently, with the last couple worlds really pushing you to show off what you've learned. They had a meaty idea with Ristar's abilities, and they really picked it to the bone in this one game. It makes for an experience that feels really complete and relatively unique. Driving this home further is the wealth of treasure chests littering each world. While not necessary to progress, they hold extra lives, health, and points, which give you a free life if you collect enough of them. They encourage you to roam off the beaten path in a way that didn't really come to life in Sonic games until 3 and Knuckles. And I'd say you're even more incentivized to sniff around in this game since there's no save feature and those extra lives are definitely going to come in handy. There's also bonus stages, which are not as exciting as Sonic's, but they're more thoughtful and offer a nice reward. It's a bit of a shame that you only get one attempt at each one, though. Not much to say with these, honestly. They're fun, and a nice break in the action. Speaking of action, I've got to talk about these bosses. I'm not going to spoil too many with the footage, but know that they get even better as the game goes on. Greedy's got a menagerie of weird shapes with big eyeballs to throw at you, and you gotta beat him to free them from his control. And honestly, these bosses are pretty great. They're never too challenging, which is honestly a breath of fresh air on the Genesis, but they do a great job of testing your skills. Like everything else in the game, you just gotta get your meat hooks on them, but finding the right window for that is a matter of dexterity and timing. My favorite boss is probably this shark-looking guy from the underwater world. He hides behind this glass wall and smashes it to blast rocks and enemies your way, but you can grab him in the split seconds he takes darting around your side of the screen. Every successful hit lowers the water level, leaving the two of you less and less room to dodge the other. It's just very tense and a great finale for a great level. And speaking of greatness, let's talk about that presentation. This game is gorgeous for the Genesis and stands as one of the best looking games on the system from that era. Sprites are intricate, appealing, and colorful, and they managed to juice some intense variety from the system's limited colors. Ristar was one of the last big titles on the system, so the dev team was basically doing donuts on this hardware, but that doesn't change the fact that this game seeps charm from every corner. A lot of that is owed to the visuals. The opening level is immediately enchanting, with a forest so lush no other adjective would do it justice. A lot of platformers around this era were just starting to toy with the idea of vast, believable worlds with realized settings, but Ristar comes in hot with some authentically immersive levels. Meanwhile, even Sonic CD just had big shapes and shit. It really helps sell the idea that you're bouncing from planet to planet, as even though there's a lot of familiar themes, fire world, water world, jungle, trees world, things get more and more alien as you progress. Another important component of the presentation here is the music. It's by Tomoko Sasaki of Knights fame, and it genuinely burns. It feels almost redundant to say a Sega game on the Genesis had a banging soundtrack, but just take a minute to recognize the auditory loving this game was shown. bright synths bounce and glide over chirpy rhythm sections and swaggering bass lines. The music is generally bubbly and easygoing, which gives the whole experience of playing a rhythmic feel. You're tempted to time your actions to the drums as they settle into smooth grooves and funky finishes. Level 2-2's theme in particular, it's genuinely one of the best compositions on this entire console. It might sound like I have no bones with Ristar at all, and I kinda don't. The lack of a save feature kinda stings, and the game could have been a little longer, but this game more than earns hidden gem status in my mind. That's a term that gets thrown around a lot, I know, but it's a crying shame this game never got a proper sequel. There was a port with some extra content on the Game Gear, which I'm sure someone has played, but Ristar kinda got discarded into the rejects pile with the likes of Bubsy and Awesome Possum. I get it, it was a war zone out there back in the day, and only the cutest and fuzziest were gonna win. I might love Ristar, but he was competing with Gex. Either way, the mascot platformer is in a new space today, where it has a lot of enthusiasm from nostalgia junkies, but not a lot of high-profile games yet. And as long as we're not getting Sonic Mania 2, maybe Ristar Mania could go on somebody's list. Maybe? Christian Whitehead? I don't know. I'd take a remake, Anyway. The ultimate question, though, is can I recommend you play Ristar as it is today? Well, yeah. Many Genesis titles come with some caveat like, oh, this game is ruthlessly difficult by today's standards, or oh, the final boss will give you a heart attack. But Ristar remains as accessible and immediate as I'm sure it was on day one. The art has aged immaculately, the controls are pretty good, if limited by the D-pad, and it's a short, sweet platforming good time. A mighty fine port is available on Steam these days, and that one even lets you save the damn game. But that's Ristar. Have you played it? Do you hate it? Comment and tell me before I go straight up freaking bananas. Visit the channel for more goodies, hit subscribe, and let pure sweet video games do the rest. Thanks so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.